Good evening, everybody. It is Steve with Real Progressives. Tonight, we are going to be doing a discussion surrounding a deeper dive into the federal job guarantee. We're going to talk a little bit about inflation around the world and how places like Japan can't crack 2% inflation while have deficit spending better than $700 billion a year. We're also going to talk about how progressives as a whole should be able to speak confidently and be able to understand the economic undertones that guard and gird up our entire platform, the things that we claim we want, and how we should be able to walk boldly with this. But before we get started, I want to just mention something real quickly. Today's been a bit difficult for me. And others that have been working, trying to do real progressive work and so forth. Let me first tell you all, number one, we're all volunteers. Number two, we're all doing the best we can for this movement. And number three, stay the fuck out of our personal lives. If you got a problem, hey man, 6 foot, 260, always willing to have a conversation. You understand what I'm saying? Always willing to have that conversation. So, without further ado, let me bring on Ellis. Ellis, sir, how are you tonight? That was riveting. Woo! That was riveting. All right. So, let me just say this before we get too far into the mix. Ellis and I are both doing this as a service to the progressive community. We are family people and we have our own private lives. What we do here at Real Progressives is for the movement. That is where our interrelationship with the crowd ends. What we do here, what we chat about, the things we say and do, that's for you to read, learn, take, activate, do whatever you've got to do. But our private lives, well, they're fucking our private lives. And straight up, don't fuck with the bull. You will get the horns. Anyway, so Ellis, let's talk about the job guarantee and why it's so vitally important to not just MMT, but to everything that progressives claim to care about, why this particular underpinning in particular helps folks that are Marxist in general, why this particular program helps balance inequality, while it's not a panacea, it is the starting point, and why it is vital in lieu of any basic income or any other program, why this is so vital to normalizing our economy and making it so that we as a nation can move towards sustainable output.
Yeah, well, first of all, the left needs to understand that way back in the day, in the 70s, it was neoliberalism that ended policies of full employment. That's where the whole problem began, okay? And when you end full employment, you end up with a situation where the capitalist begins a campaign of wage suppression, okay? And, breaking unions, breaking the strength of unions and whatnot. And over a long period of time, it goes by with wage suppression. You've got productivity demands going way up, the real wage going way off here, it's staying flat, and you have this gap, okay? So, with wages being suppressed over a long period of time, you sort of lose the stable means to consume what we're producing as a nation, right? And on top of that, with the productivity being out of line with the real wage, you're driving national income, which is GDP, more to capital, more to the rich, and away from workers. And in the end, like I said, over this long period of time, what happens is that people start to notice society being restructured along with the economy. And they sort of don't understand, don't remember these things, and they forget a lot, and it's sort of like being in quicksand. You just get stuck there and you sink down. And people start looking for solutions, and then politicians, they begin haranguing us about what we need to do to fix this and that, and it's never correct. And in the end, it all boils down to the fact that full employment ended 40 years ago. And when we initiated government-mandated involuntary unemployment, all right, and we've maintained that, and you've seen the long-term effects of long-term unemployment, social decay, crime rates rising, racial tensions increasing, mental illness rates increasing, physical illness. All of this is a result of the end of full employment. And when we get to this point in time, and some progressives, they seem to think, well, what we need is a basic income guarantee. And like I said, they're forgetting that this whole thing started with breaking the neck of full employment. And they think that the solution is not to reinstitute the situation of full employment in perpetuity with decent wages and great benefits. Yeah. So this is why the federal job guarantee is vitally important. It brings back full employment, and it abolishes involuntary unemployment. It ends the problem, okay, of involuntary unemployment, and works to enhance the private sector. So over time, things get better. But the job guarantee being an automatic stabilizer, like SNAP, welfare, unemployment insurance, the job guarantee itself is a superior stabilizer in that it actually kind of, you could say, patches capitalism, so that it patches a flaw in capitalism, so that the capitalist can't run roughshod over labor anymore, over the average person anymore. And it stabilizes prices, so you don't have to worry about inflation, because if there is an inflationary episode, the job guarantee will handle it without creating more unemployment. So it's vital that we begin to understand this part. And another vital thing that we need to understand also, Steve, that people need to understand, is how we redefine work, and the job guarantee helps us to do that.
Now, I want to read something from Scott Fulwiler, and with all due respect, I'm going to go off camera, folks. Well, actually, I'll just do it through the thing here. So Scott Fulwiler was helping us answer somebody who wrote some long, conservative, disgusting diatribe to us. It claimed to be a progressive, but was railing on us being too left-wing by talking about a federal job guarantee. But here's what Scott Fulwiler's response to this guy was. He said, number one, you have two choices, an unemployed buffer stock or an employed buffer stock. If you don't like the job guarantee, you are by definition saying you preferred unemployed buffer stock.
That's
Number
correct.
two, there has never been a time that the private sector created enough jobs for everyone to have one that wanted one. So
Oh, go Scott.
Unemployed. What's that?
Go Scott.
Yes.
Yeah.
It says there's never been a time that the private sector created enough jobs for everyone to have one that wanted one. So you are left with unemployed versus employed buffer stock. Training does not create jobs. It simply means that different people will get the available jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And number three, macroeconomic policy at the Fed deliberately keeps the amount of workers without jobs at around 5% of the labor force, give or take. This is in order to reduce inflation pressures. Training doesn't fix this and amounts to a micro policy of blaming the unemployed, while macro policy causes the unemployment. In other words, as long as there aren't enough jobs in the private sector and policy makes sure this is the case, then blaming the unemployed for the existence of unemployment is simply ignorant. Number four, an employed buffer stock would serve as a counter to inflationary pressures, just as the unemployed one does in theory. This has been shown in several studies. An employed buffer stock is number 5. An employed buffer stock is cost effective. It isn't expensive, reduces many other costs of government services, unemployment benefits, Medicaid, EITC, etc. Further, just think about how much we spend on administrative structure to deal with involuntary unemployment. Social workers, government administration, extra policy officers, prison system, healthcare, court systems, etc., etc. Unemployment is shown in many studies to have statistically significant relationship to virtually every single social problem. It's not a stretch to say that if you prefer an unemployed buffer stock, you prefer more crime, more murders, and more suicides. So that is from Dr. Scott Fulwiler of UMKC. So the UBI crowd that sits there and says shit, they just got schooled in spades. I mean, flashing gang symbols, everything else right there. Scott Fulwiler dunked from the free throw line, tongue wagging out like Jordan, winning the game. Just totally decimated the idiocy in one fell swoop.
That was absolutely, in my experience and in my opinion, absolutely the most brilliant short reply that I have ever heard on the subject. It should be emblazoned in stone on Capitol Hill, simply because that's a short, concise truth. That was an absolutely beautiful display of reality right there, slammed into somebody's face, whoever it was. And I think that should be preserved and archived forever. Right. Well, do not lose that, because it's like holy writ there. That's awesome.
It's just so you know, it is on the page right now, but I will go ahead and I will add it. Scott Fulwiler is one of the bigs. He's one of the guys that we always talk about with MMT. He teaches at UMKC. He's a friend of Stephanie Kelton's. He good guy. Knows his stuff, been around the block a few times, and writes extensively about these things. He's been masterful in his explanations. So in any event, I am going to go ahead and copy this stuff, I think. I'm going to try to anyway. We'll see what happens if I can somehow or another get this information out there. I will do my dead level best to, in fact, it's not letting me do it. For some reason, I'm not able to do it. But that's okay. I will try my best to get somebody to cut and paste it in there. If somebody sees the picture that's up, by all means, please put it up there. I, however, am not able to do it for whatever reason. So in any event, let's get back to it, Ellis. Mm-hmm. Obviously, one of the things that should concern everyone, Uncle Milton Friedman, Uncle Milty, the godfather of neoliberalism, is the Mac Daddy of UBI. He is the originator of UBI. Well, one of the originators of UBI, champion, I should say, of UBI.
Negative income tax.
Just an awful human being, maybe one of the worst people of all time. And literally the guy that we hold out there still to this day, people use, and worse, in the progressive community, use this right-wing hack as their bellwether of what economic literacy is. And this is a guy who wanted to fight for a UBI. Why? Because he felt the problem with our country had nothing to do with more public spending. It had to do with we didn't have enough capitalism. More capitalism would help the poor. That's what the problem with poverty is. We need more capitalism. So if we give them money to spend, they'll spend it, and the capitalists will get more money. That was what his view of the world was. And by doing it that way, they could literally start eroding the entire safety net. This is the idea here is, oh, well, now you've got a UBI. You don't need a safety net. Let's get rid of all these services and we'll just privatize everything, because what we need is more capitalism. And this is so ironic that progressives and socialists the petty bourgeoisie, folks, all this nonsense, would sit there and champion Uncle Milty bullshit and try to tell us that a buffer stock of employment, which Scott Fulwiler and yourself have just laid the smackdown on, that they would continue to peddle that as the panacea for all that's wrong with the world. And the reality is what they've done is they've set the stage to show that the left is economically illiterate, that they sit there, they fall in love with things, they don't know where it comes from, they don't pay attention, and there you've got Uncle Milty snickering from the grave, chuckling about this stuff as his evil legacy lives on. I mean, this is ridiculous to me. I don't understand why the left would be fascinated. They try to make the job guarantee do things that it doesn't do, right? So will take us into the next part of our discussion. So the job guarantee does not solve for people that want to play video games all day. The job guarantee does not make it so that you don't have to help.
It might.
You know what? You're right. It might. It might. It might.
It depends on what the local community views as socially valuable.
That's true. If the community deems that socially valuable, it could in fact do it. So yes. But the point I'm making is that the job guarantee is not there for people that don't want to do anything. The job guarantee's purpose is to solve involuntary unemployment. And it is to peg the economy to labor, and is to give us a buffer stock of employed labor, and labor being the redefinition of what work is, right? Because all the automation's coming, Ellis. So
doesn't matter.
Talk about this. Give the next breakdown of this.
The job guarantee. I'm just going to say it. I'm not going to look for ways to break it down so that people can understand. I'm just going to talk. And if you get confused, just pop some questions and I'll answer them. All right. The job guarantee, like Scott Fulwiler pointed out, is that it's a buffer stock of employed persons. All right. This is critical for the economy. And the reason why is because the job guarantee pays a fixed minimum wage that we decide on. Okay, when we say minimum wage, don't start thinking in terms of like, oh, maybe $7, $8 an hour. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a defined wage, okay, that we decide as society is the lowest acceptable wage that we will tolerate in this nation, which would become the floor. All right, that fixed wage becomes a price anchor. This is how you anchor the dollar to labor. Okay, so that's a nominal price anchor. But what we also have to understand is that, like Fulwiler pointed out, it's a buffer stock. This means it absorbs workers and it spits workers out. All right. So over here you have private sector workers and they're doing their thing. And currently in the Naira economy, which we have today, you just have unemployed people wandering around hopeless. All right. All right. What we do with the job guarantee is we install it into the economy. There it goes, chunk. Okay, now it's a buffer stock. So over here you have private sector labor, and over here you have job guarantee workers, and they're in this pool. And they can leave the job guarantee pool and move over to the private sector and work in the private sector. And if anything goes wrong in the private sector, say inflationary pressures rise, and the government has to adjust aggregate demand, guess what happens? They just leave the private sector and they move over into the job guarantee. They remain employed and inflation is attenuated. Okay? This is the ultimate purpose of the job guarantee in macroeconomic terms. It literally patches this one particular flaw in capitalism. It causes us to be able to look at the Phillips curve and the Phillips curve trade-off and say, whatever, and ignore it because there isn't one. Right? Okay, great. So we have abolished involuntary unemployment while still having price stability, meaning that inflation is not going to go skyrocketing and we're all going to die like Milton Friedman claimed that would happen if government tried to lower the unemployment rate below a certain number. All So on an emotional level or a politically emotional level, you could argue that, well, it helps people, and it does. It certainly does. You know, it makes people's lives so much better. Okay, they have choice. There's always a job waiting for them, and they're not crappy jobs, which we'll get into. All right. But the macroeconomic purpose is to provide stability. Right? It abolishes not the business cycle, but the effects of the business cycle. So it acts counter-cyclically, just like the government should be behaving. When there is an economic downturn, people will leave the private sector and they'll move into the job guarantee and remain employed. Okay, and with that, the deficit will automatically rise because there are more workers for the government to pay. And when the economy is in an expansion, when it's doing well, these workers in the job guarantee, some of them, or lots of them, will leave the job guarantee and move to the private sector for higher paying and work and better benefits. Okay, and so since there are less workers for the government to pay, the deficit automatically drops. Okay, so we always have full employment. All right, this is superior to a UBI, quite obviously. As I said in the beginning of the program, the whole problem that we have today began with the ending of full employment and wage suppression. The job guarantee acts to reverse that. It creates it creates full employment with price stability. Okay, and over time it enhances the private sector, but it doesn't interfere with private sector wage structure. Okay, it doesn't do that. All right, it just sets this base wage here. All right, and that's the floor for the economy, and wages can't fall through that. So if you set it at $15 an hour, okay, that's the minimum, plus benefits. Okay, there are benefits involved as well, healthcare and all that. All right, but you do that. Over time, the entire program, the initial cost of the job guarantee when we first started is going to be so large. Okay, not too much. It's not very expensive at all. But over time, it will enhance the private sector, and the job guarantee pool will be smaller than it was in the beginning at all times, which means the expense for the job guarantee drops. Okay, UBI, on the other hand, you're talking about adding trillions of dollars to the federal budget on top of everything else. Okay, well, the fiscal agenda, I hate the word budget. So you're adding trillions of dollars more to the fiscal agenda. And though big numbers don't scare me either, the point being is that you're injecting all of these dollars into the economy, all right, trillions of them, to give people some money so they can end up giving it to the capitalists. Or you can take human labor and you can redirect it to social productivity, which is sustainable and not environmentally harmful. See?
What do you suppose? I mean, I got into a fight with I don't know if I'm a friend or former friend at this point, because these people get so damn butthurt when you lay truth on them. The guy was absolutely flailing about saying, what if I don't want to work? And I told him, this is a voluntary program. If you want to be unemployed, no one is forcing you. Well, I need money. Well, then you have the answer to your problem.
Okay, well, you see, we're not eliminating the private sector, are we? Okay, so it would be the same thing as today. You could easily go to the private sector and look for a job, or you could take a job guarantee. If you don't want either, that's why we propose a basic income guarantee wrapped up into the package, you see? All right, so if you just absolutely don't want to work and you don't want to contribute, that's fine. But I wish to make this very clear. Millions upon millions of people would rather work. It's not a guess. I'm not just guessing. Millions of people would rather work. Okay, so for those people who want a job and who wish to work, you don't have a right to tell them they're not allowed to just because you don't want to. Okay, it's real simple.
And that to me infuriated me, because he's like, well, what if I don't want to work? What if I don't want to work?
Okay,
I just think to myself, well, but even without the UBI or big, it shouldn't be called a UBI though here, because what it should be called is a basic income for those who choose to opt out of actually participating in helping society, right? But the point is that in this particular case, it was like, what if I don't want, and it was just this rabid feeling that like, hey, you guys that do want a job, fuck you, because the only thing that I'm making room for is my desire to not work. Yeah. I mean, that pissed me off in beyond words, the idea that somebody would literally sideline everybody because they don't want a job. Anyway, it just infuriated me. But that is prevalent, my friend. That is prevalent. Yeah. That's why we're doing the show tonight, because that sick mindset exists. And it doesn't exist in onesie-twosies. It exists in large swaths. So I don't know whether or not people will start waking up to the macroeconomic side of this to understand all the pluses regarding what Scott Fulweiler said, what you've said, et cetera. But also just understanding that what we're trying to solve here is involuntary unemployment, right? We're trying
to abolish that, but we're also trying to provide price stability. We're trying to fix certain elements of the economy that are flawed. Okay, and you can't do that by just handing people some money. Okay, you have to have work involved because there's output. All right. You can't allow low-wage environments to continue unabated. You just can't, all right? You can't do that. You have to bring wages back in line with productivity, and wages have simply got to go up. The real wage has to go up. Wages have to go up, all right? This is nothing you can do about that. And our economy operates on production. It's based on output. You got to have output, all right? And with that, you're going to have unemployment because the government's deficit is always too low. All right? This is the problem. As I said, it all started with ending full employment. Just because 40 years have gone by and neoliberalism has screwed with you so much that you can't tell what the hell's going on anymore, okay, and that you can't tell that private debt is now being used to replace wages to help you keep on consuming. Okay, you can't figure out. These people can't figure out something simple. They ask me a lot. They go, "What about the price of bread?" I hate that question because it's ignorant. It has nothing to do with anything. But they say, "Look at the cost of living. It just keeps going up and up. But wages keep dropping and dropping and dropping. Wages haven't kept up. Well, government must be devaluing the dollar." No, that's not what's happening. Wages have been persistently suppressed and reduced further and further and further. So guess what? All right. If you replace wages with private debt, consumer spending keeps on going. You do that over a long period of time, it's the price level is going to behave as though wages kept pace with productivity. You see, you just haven't noticed the private debt. You haven't noticed all this stuff because you're looking at all this stuff, you can't figure out what's going on, but it's all related to a loss of full employment. It's related to the Nairu economy. It's related to forced involuntary unemployment. And if we abolish that, the course will correct itself. It's not a silver bullet for every single problem, but it is a step in the right direction. And it is, I will say, a massive step. It's not a little baby step. It's a massive step to undoing 40 years of destructive behavior. Okay, so, you don't get that with a UBI. It's just not going to happen.
So let me address something that I think is important, right? So if we're telling, I mean, right now today, people that are disabled get Social Security. I mean, they're eligible for Social Security. Okay. So we've always advocated for expanding Social Security.
Right.
This is not something new. This is not something that should be shocking. And Social Security, expanding Social Security, quite frankly, you call it a basic income for all I care. But why in the world wouldn't we just leverage an existing system right now, get rid of FICA, raise the amount paid, and make that your basic income for those that qualify. And for those that don't qualify or whatever, they have the job guarantee. It just is another way of looking at this.
You're talking about rolling operations, all these administrative duties and everything into one organization. Is that what you're talking about?
Sure, why not?
Yeah, it's like I said one time, I was like 3 or 4 years ago, I said, you know, if you really want to be, I forget who I was talking to, is if you really want to be realistic about all these administrative costs and all this shit, you could just roll basic income into the Social Security Administration and let them handle it. End of story.
Well,
here's
the thing. Yeah. Let's be fair. For those people, when we talk about work, right? So I don't know whether you all do this, but I can work from home sometimes. They have call centers where people that can't get around, physically can't get around, are sitting there able to work from their couch, work from their bed, work laying down. I can't work. Okay, yes, you can. There's an opportunity if you so choose. Okay, there are ways of doing this, all right? The flip side of that is that Social Security for disabled individuals, et cetera, that's a different story than choosing and saying, I just don't want to work. I don't feel it. I ain't feeling it. Guys, I ain't feeling. I'm perfectly okay. I'm tossing the pill. I'm hanging out. But I don't feel it. But I want to have the same amount of money in my pocket as the guy who chose to get a job. Sure. You know what I mean? At some point in time, logic needs to reign partially in here, because there has to be something to say, hey, we want you contributing to society. We're incentivizing your contribution to your local community. There's some form. This is not a meritocracy here. The idea here is to incent you to be involved in your local community as well. So I have this feeling that, you know, everybody's got these doomsday, you know, hyper-focused niche scenarios that they paint out in their head, you know, and it's like, to me, quite frankly, you know, I don't want to see anybody that's incapable of working to be left destitute. Nobody's suggesting that. It's preposterous. But for some dude that just feels like throwing a football all day long, and that's not something the local community values, I'm sorry. I don't see some great hand-wringing moment there. I'm just sorry. Why bother? You know? No, I'm sorry. I don't know. What do you think, Ellis?
Well, we don't propose at all to leave society's most vulnerable to the whim. You know, if you can't get a job, you're screwed. No, we propose to take care of them. All right. But for those people who can work but choose not to, I think Stephen Hale brought up this point on one of the shows. Might have been his last show that he was on, or the one prior to that. He said that you know, we talk about a basic income guarantee would be there, but it would be far less generous than what you would earn working in the job guarantee. And that's it right there. You know, you can either choose to be a member of society, or you can drop out. You can start your own business. You can do whatever you want. You know, there'll be this basic income, but it's not going to provide you with enough money to buy a brand new car and buy a brand new house and all that crap, you know. And we're not forcing people, well, I don't want to work. Well, you don't have to. You can survive. But why should as I explained, the problems with the economy need to be addressed, and it's not addressed by handing people a check and saying, go spend. All right, you hear this, I've heard this argument before, and I'm not talking about automation, I'm talking about this silly argument about, well, this gives people more of an opportunity to start their own business. You heard that before? Give the lowest income distribution a chance to start their own business. And they point to the Finnish example. The Finnish test case is an example of this, where people are making like 500 euros a month. They're given 500 euros a month basic income. If the bottom income distribution is only given 500 euros, how can they start their own business? How can they quit working on that? They can't. They got to. And in fact, we see right away that people are saying, well, this makes those low-wage part-time jobs that we once wouldn't consider, they make them kind of appealing. Right, of course, because you got to keep working. So it's an upward distribution of income is all it is. All right, and it's a subsidy to the business owner, all right, who should be paying a full-time wage. The government picks up the other half of full-time wage, and he gets to keep his low-wage underemployment. How does this fix the economy? How does this do anything? I understand that it helps people relieve their stress and financial worry to some extent, and I'm all for that. I'm not against that. but I am against it as a standalone solution, including a living wage one, because, like I said, the job guarantee provides price stability. The UBI has no inflation control mechanism. It's just whatever. All it is an aggregate demand tool, a tool to increase aggregate demand. Okay? And sooner or later, on a living wage one for everybody, you're going to get aggregate demand to the point where you come up against that inflation barrier. You're either going to have one choice or another. You got to raise the UBI, which will only make things worse. All right? So the value of it doesn't get eroded, or you've got to stop. In which case, it's no longer a living wage UBI, is it? It's senseless.
Let me ask a question, because I did a live stream the other night where I compared the UBI to school vouchers, and I explained that there was nothing to anchor the price of anything by doing it. There was no just the standalone UBI was basically the same as a school voucher. The rich get their $5,000. The poor get their $5,000. At the end of the day, there's still a scarcity of schools because you haven't fundamentally changed anything. But now all of a sudden, the rich will take their $5,000 UBI, school voucher, and they will take that and match that $5,000, and they will go to some rich place anyway. So you've subsidized the wealthy to now go to a private school, and the poor are still stuck in the poor school. Nothing has changed. It's status quo. The same as would be with a UBI, because you have nothing to anchor it. By doing the job guarantee, like I've said before, you want to talk about a UBI after you gave me a job guarantee, knock yourself out. But it would be stupid, because a UBI for everybody at the end of the day there's no value to it in terms of it is literally status quo. The only thing that's truly not status quo is the job guarantee. So talk a little bit about the term aggregate demand, because in MMT, there's sayings that say we demand aggregate demand, and so the average person that doesn't use terms like aggregate demand in their daily discussions. Can you talk about aggregate demand momentarily, Ellis?
Mm-hmm. Aggregate demand is all consumers in the nation spending on the whole. Okay, it's consumer spending on the national scale. Not just Steve Grumbine going and buying some Skittles, all right? That's demand, yeah, but it's not aggregate demand. We're talking about aggregate, meaning on the whole level of the whole economy. Every consumer spending, okay? That consumer spending altogether is what we call aggregate demand. And we want it to increase. Why? Because when aggregate demand increases, this puts pressure on business to increase its production, okay? So it will increase output, but to do that, it needs to hire more workers. So the unemployment rate will drop. As aggregate demand increases, the unemployment rate drops. But once you reach maximum output, where no more labor can be found to increase output, all right, that's it. You stop. Okay, we're nowhere near that. So yeah, we demand aggregate demand. The government has spent years suppressing aggregate demand, okay? And involuntary unemployment is one way to do that.
So that brings me to the next point, Ellis, because whenever we bring these things up, invariably the comments from the peanut gallery typically devolve into, what about inflation, Ellis? What about inflation? And before we dive too far in there, because we've done many programs on inflation, I want to talk specifically about Japan, who is another monetarily sovereign nation that has a free-floating fiat currency of its own, that has $750 billion a year in deficit spending, 250% debt to GDP ratio, and more importantly, they can't crack 2% inflation in that little island nation known as Japan, that former empire, little tiny island. Same thing, quite frankly, with the UK and other places. Why is it that in America only, it seems to be American driven, this fear porn about inflation and stuff like that? And when we talk about serving the 99%, immediately people have I don't know if it's like a heartfelt desire to cry about inflation, or whether they've just been, glazed over with this inflation zombie stuff. But this comes up every single time without fail. So why is it that we can spend trillions on the F-35 fighter, but we can't seem to spend even small amounts of money to make the lives of average Americans better without having the porn come out, the inflation porn come out?
Because if you spend for the public purpose of full employment, we're all going to die, Stephen. That's why. That's why you don't hear about it with the F-35, okay? Because we're not going to all die. That's just perfect and fine and dandy. It's only things that benefit the public, Stephen. Yeah. See, that's the way the nature of inflation. See, inflation is a natural thing in the universe, okay? And capitalism is natural. It's a product of the universe. And there are certain laws, natural laws like physics, that cannot be broken. One of them is this. If you spend $1 on military weapons, that's not inflationary. If you spend $1 on food stamps, it's extraordinarily inflationary. There's nothing you can do about it. What I'm talking about here is economics. People think this is economics, that's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about economics when we're talking about this crap. Okay, we're talking about propaganda. The 1%'s propaganda that's been codified into a book called economics. It's not economics at all. All right. To answer your question, it seems like it's a US phenomenon, but it's not. It's quite alive in the UK as well. Inflation, we're all going to die. You'll hear that, except you'll hear, inflation, my God, we're all going to die. Yeah, and you hear it in Australia as well. It's because that's what.
Hold on. There's a difference though, because even in their austerity, they're still like the idea of the bootstrapping nonsense that our Ayn Rand heroin this country suckle onto. It's preposterous. I mean, we are just literally full of rugged individualism. Okay, yeah.
The truth is Americans are a little bit more steeped in the propaganda, but I'm trying to tell you, in the UK, the nonsense is still there. Don't you remember that one guy? His name was Benjamin. You put up the image of his little tweet, and he says, I would rather have homeless persons than lose my property rights. You wouldn't hear that crap in the UK 40, 50 years ago. That's emigrated from America. That's an American export, kind of like Budweiser. But rather bad. But anyway, this is available. You can hear it in the UK and you hear it in Australia as well. But the reason why is because that's what the monetarists based all this crap on in the 70s. They took the great inflation crisis, and then Friedman just simply pointed out that there's this natural rate of unemployment that will settle. The market will settle, and it won't be inflationary. So what will happen is that unemployment will go like this until it stops, and inflation will go like this till it stops. And when the two meet and there's no inflation, whatever level of unemployment that is the natural rate of unemployment. But he didn't mean it like it's natural to the universe. Okay, he just meant that's what it would be. And if government tries to reduce that unemployment rate, then accelerating inflation will follow, because the velocity of money is constant and output is always constant, right? So, oh my God, we're all going to die from inflation, right? And this has been the excuse and the Phillips curve trade-off for 40 years. Can't have full employment because inflation. So anything that the government does to lower that unemployment rate will be inflationary. But see, that's where it all ties in. Anything that the government does is inflationary because the market is sovereign. It's self-actualized. Don't you understand? The market self-optimizes. If only government would quit meddling. Just get out of the market. The market would do its thing and it would optimize, and everybody would live a life of prosperity. But no, the government has to come in there and cause inflation and screw with everything. And it's printing money, Stephen, and devaluing the dollar. And before you know it, inflation explosion and we're all going to die. Now it's doing QE and we're all going to die. Inflation. It's like, it's a concept that you can't get away from because it's so ingrained now in the public's head. Over 40 years, it's just been hammered into their brains. Inflation is the scariest thing in the world. And the truth is, the effects of inflation are meaningless next to the effects of long-term unemployment. I'm telling you right now, there's never been a case where inflation, okay, has resulted in a rise in physical, mental illness, high crime rates, racial tensions, okay, gender discrimination, how far, child mortality, infant mortality rates, how many more, but inflation doesn't cause these things, okay, unemployment does. The effects of, plus lost output. Can you calculate that? Yeah. But you know how big it is. It is enormous. Think of it now over 40 years, how much lost output we've had. You can't get that back, Stephen. It's gone forever. It's lost forever because we can't back up in time and start over. Time keeps marching forward, see? So you've lost all that output. So the point is simple. Here's your iPhone 7. All right, that's what I have in my hand right now. And this came out last year, so we'll call it 2016, right? We'll just say that. iPhone 7 is the top of the line cell phone in the year 2016. But how do you know if we had maintained full employment and never listened to Friedman, never listened to the monitors, maintained full employment and just kept on going? How do you know that the iPhone 7 itself would not have been top of the line in 1999? Yeah. You don't. And you'll never know. You'll never know. Because we've kept so many people in forced involuntary unemployment, all right? And we've suppressed wages. We've lost so much output and we've lost so much time. But we've basically gone backwards. We've just sort of ground a halt and stopped and decided we weren't going to move forward anymore. So all these wonderful advances in technology that you're seeing today could have been done years ago. In fact, Kennedy said, we chose to go to the moon, right? We chose to go to the moon, not and do this thing, not because they're easy, but because they're hard, right? He said that. It only took 10 fucking years from that to get on the goddamn moon, didn't it? That's a hell of a lot of technological progress in just 10 fucking years, all right? How much progress have computers made in the last 10 years? Nothing compared to that. Right? So, hey.
So what I want to take here, piggybacking on this, is I want to show folks a spiral that we go through and see if you can help make heads or tails of it, Alice, and see if this resonates for everybody else, okay? So what happens? We have these spirals where we start going belly up. The economy starts tanking. We go into a recession. The rich, they're doing fine. They hold serve. They're fine up there. You and I, we end up being downsized, reduction in force. We end up being, we've got a consolidation. And now all of a sudden they've demoted you or you've outright lost your job. Now all of a sudden some scowling conservative looks over at you and wonders why you're so lazy. All of a sudden, you're desperate not to be seen as lazy. You're desperate to pay your bills. The child support people are chasing you. The mortgage is coming after you. So you take the first available job. That job is $50,000 less than you made before. Capitalist is still rich. You're now making 50% less, but you still have all the debt that was occurred as if you were making up here. Now you have to pay interest on top of penalties, on top of interest, going straight up to them again. And then all of a sudden they say, we got to cut expenses again. Now they right size you again. You bring your wages back down again. They're still stable up at the top. Nothing's changed for them, but you keep sending more and more interest up there. Now the wage, this gap, the neoliberalism gap just keeps growing and growing and growing. And this is the financialization of our entire economy is pushing you and I to private debt. They sit fat and happy taking in the interest, smoking Cohibas, drinking Grand Marnier on their yacht. And we're sitting here running around yelling at each other going, damn Muslims, goddamn Mexicans. Yeah, you got to take them jobs, man. Yeah. And this is going on purpose. And we could solve it with a job guarantee where when we hit that spot, doesn't hurt us anymore, not in the way it did. Ellis, Did I get that close to right?
I mean, yeah, except to say each recession, okay, with each recession, this provides, and I'm just going to say it in a political way, because this way it would be familiar for people, just everyday people to understand what I'm saying. With each recession, this allows the 1% to restructure the economy one more time. So when you have a recession, okay, the 1% says, okay, now we're going to reduce wages further, or we're going to increase part-time employment. We're going to get rid of more and more full-time jobs and just replace them with part-time jobs and low wages, okay? And what this does is it prevents us from selling what we produce as a nation, okay? You can't get rid of all of it. So the only way is private debt, especially if the government's not going to spend. Yeah? So, banks make it easy for people who literally shouldn't have credit and have no business having it, seriously. They make it easy for them to get it. And so they can keep on spending. Everyone can just keep on spending and keep on spending and keep on spending. And private debt will expand and blah, blah, blah. And you'll hear people talk about how great the world is. And we're at 4.9%, so we're almost at full employment. Better tell the Fed to put on the brakes because we're going to overheat, goddammit, when no such thing is occurring. And then consumers find that they've just taken on too much debt. And, their income is radically insufficient. So they stop spending. In other words, pressure on consumer savings begins to increase. So consumers just save. And this lowers consumer spending. And when that does, business enters the inventory cycle. It has all this excess inventory that it can't sell. And it has a surplus of workers that it no longer needs because demand has fallen. So it lays them off. Now they're unemployed. And the truth is that workers spend their wages, okay? So when workers are unemployed, they don't have any wages. First thing they do, a lot of them, is they run to get their unemployment insurance, they run to government, and they get their welfare benefits, food stamp benefits, so they can keep on spending and survive. Guess what happens? Deficit automatically increases. You get this recession, okay? And a deficit that's going up, and people are like, I don't get it. And then some of them will tell you, well, that's proof that the deficit causes a recession. See, the deficit's rising, we have a recession. The recession, has nothing to do with the deficit, except that it's not sufficient.
Well, exactly. Now, one of the things that really has me baffled, and folks, this is an impassioned plea to each of you out there, okay? Hillary Clinton was a neoliberal. Barack Obama, a neoliberal. Donald Trump, a neoliberal. A neoliberal. Bill Clinton, damn near father of democratic neoliberalism. Senior, neoliberal. Reagan, neoliberal. Carter, neoliberal. Ford, neoliberal. At what point in time did it change? I mean, really, at the end of the day, we have seen this forever. And we've gotten so ingrained in it that when I hear people today telling me that they're going to fight neoliberalism, they're fighting neoliberalism, and they can't define the basics of what exactly it is that they're fighting, I worry, because this is a war we must win. This is a war with a very, very organized, determined, smart, evil, okay, goal. And that really is bring about feudal society again. I mean, this is all about pushing out as much privatization, literally eliminating the public space, and having us all accountable to corporations, basically. At the end of the day, these high-end interests. It's up to us to defeat neoliberalism by fighting yet again for the public purpose and bringing it back to the worker. And this is not just some ancient Marxist class struggle we're talking about. This is a modern day story of class struggle that has been left aside because of neoliberalism injecting identity politics to skew the game, to divide us from being able to unite and win. And so for everybody that sits there and hypes identity politics over top of the class struggle, they are by definition balkanizing the power, and they are eliminating our effectiveness. So therefore, the capitalists will always win. The neoliberals will always win. Always win. Kamala Harris, do you know, this is no joke, Ellis, this lady Kamala Harris, who is a freshman, but she's got the right look, she's got the right connections, she's all of a sudden being lauded by the Hillary crowd. And what they're doing is they're elevating her, getting ready, and they've already started. Oh, the only reason you'd be against Kamala is you're a misogynist. You're a racist. These are things that come out of the woodwork before we've even had a chance to vet her. But when you follow the money, you realize she's a neoliberal. She's part of the neoliberal. She is a bona fide neoliberal. When you realize that, and you realize that they're going to use a shutdown tactic to make it so you cannot actually address the fact that she is a neoliberal, not some, adjective that you don't understand, a bona fide neoliberal, okay? This is what the setup is, and it's getting ready to happen yet again, whether it be Kamala or some other person. But this is the perversion of identity politics. People think that they're being noble warriors fighting these things. We should have equality, period. 100% equality across the board. So the issue comes down to, I can't legislate you liking somebody, but I can legislate the basis of law being treated fairly. That is something that we can do. So we need to focus on class struggle here, because without the 99% working people fighting back against neoliberalism, we are dead to rights. Did I get that close to right there, Ellis, or am I kind of wet behind the ears still?
Well, I don't know about the political, whoever the lady is. I don't follow politics much anymore. But yeah, about the neoliberalism, yeah, there's a succession of presidents that go all the way back to the 70s, more or less of neoliberal opinion. Neoliberalism, as far as the Democratic Party, took off with Bill Clinton and the New Democrats. This was around the same time in the UK with Tony Blair and New Labour. See, it's all new. It's neoliberal is what it is. But Reagan, there's really no difference. It's just policy choices. All right, and neither of those policy choices are of any benefit to anyone except the 1%.
Absolutely. All right, so let me take the last step here before we close out. One of the things that I think that our understanding of economics will do is give us the strength and conviction to take on the whole power structure. Because ultimately, whether we can vote our way through, doesn't matter whether that's the case, we are not united. Let's say hypothetically that everything that we ever wanted, the elections aren't fixed, there's no fraud, there's no this, there's no that. Shove that off to the side, get that excuse out of the way. Then the next step is that, we can't possibly do it because there's money in politics. Well, guess what, guys? Doesn't matter whether it's money or some other thing. At the end of the day, let's push that aside. If we focus and understand the economic truth underlying all this, and we unite, instead of allowing the Rothschild bullshit to come in, instead of allowing the inflation shit to come in, instead of allowing all these other bullshit things about the valuing of the dollar and you're devaluing my dollar and all this other nonsense. If we understand macroeconomic reality and we unite around it, we can in fact invest every single town hall, every single radio station, news station, every single congressman's office, every single alderman's office, every city council, you name it. And we can make demands, and they will listen if we do it in numbers sufficient to get their attention. But if we're sitting there dinkering around the edges, playing games, trying to talk about nonsense, we will literally be sidelined, just like identity politics takes us out of the game yet again. I mean, to me, this is true hope. This is true unifying This is the unifying message instead of all this other side nonsense that keeps getting thrown up to distract from the teachings. This is literally actionable, unifiable, and it is the way forward. Would you support that statement, Ellis, or do you have a different take?
No, I would support that. MMT, understanding the fundamentals of how federal spending works, okay, how national government spending works, okay, and also understanding fundamentals such as why Greece is not like the UK and not like Australia or the US. Understanding these things should be a prerequisite. It needs to be a core. It needs to be at the core. And this allows us to progress because it allows you to walk into a town hall meeting. It allows you to walk into a congressman's office and not just one person, but many people and say, all right, we already know how it works. You're not going to BS us anymore. When are you going to give us a job guarantee? When are you going to give us universal health care? When are we going to get this done? Or do we have to vote you out? Do you have to get rid of you? This is what gives you, what can you say, the energy. It gives you the impetus to go out there and know that genuine hope exists, that you have it right, and you can overcome this. You can literally shut down a congressman now because they can't out BS. They just can't use BS on you anymore. You know what's the real score. And when they sit up there and say, "Oh no, wait, the national debt is at epic proportions and it's a crisis," you know that you can shout them down until they walk off the stage. There you have it. They're full of it. So the people have power. And what can empower them is knowledge, basic, fundamental knowledge of how the government spends, okay? How its spending operations function, all right? Just to know that alone is enough to empower you to win this battle, okay? So, yeah, I would say that MMT needs to be at the core. And what are traditional leftist values and ideas need to be embraced, all right? But at the core, there must be knowledge of how federal spending works, how a currency issuing national government spends. It's imperative that people understand that so that they don't fall for the neoliberal dogma of, like, the federal government requires the proceeds from tax collections in order to be able to fund something. Right? It doesn't spend those proceeds from tax collections. National debt, a bunch of savings accounts, or you could say the national debt is every single dollar that the government has ever spent into existence minus what it's taxed away since the founding of the nation. All right? This is nothing to be afraid of. It's our surplus. So as long as the government's got all this debt, right, it's our surplus. Right? We understand these things. We understand then what the problem with a nation like Greece is. Greece doesn't issue its own currency as a user of what amounts to a foreign currency, and that's why it's in so much trouble. That and the fact that Germany is beating it down into submission. All right? Once you understand all that, you hear someone like Theresa May get up there, or you hear someone like Bill Clinton get up there, or you hear someone like Donald Trump get up there, and they say things like, "We could become like the next Greece here." They're full of shit. It's not like, well, we got to fact check that. You don't have to fact check it. Somebody just told you the moon doesn't exist. That's bullshit. It's right there. So you're full of shit. You can shout them down on that right now, and they know they're full of shit. They know. Theresa May over there in Britain, she knows she's full of shit. She knows she's full of shit when she said, "We have seen in Greece what happens when you don't deal with the deficit debt." And she knows she's full of shit, all right? And when politicians over here in America say that, they all know they're full of shit, all right? So the trick is not to let the people know they're full of shit. MMT gives you the insight to realize they are full of shit. You don't need to fact check it, and you can shout them down. It's real simple. So yeah, long answer, Yeah, I agree with that statement.
It empowers us to take action. It is
Aaron Taylor's. I want to give credit where credit's due. That's Aaron Taylor's work. Okay, MMT is empowering, and so it is, and so it is, and so it is.
So I think that you brought up a really good point, because this is a global scourge. Yeah. These people know they're full of shit. Okay, and they absolutely know they're full of shit. And what I'm trying to make sure that we understand is, regardless of whether Stalin or Hitler or, Mugabe or, Pinochet or any of these other folks are in power, understanding MMT in the United States in particular, but around the world, quite frankly, allows us to make demands no matter who's in office, no matter who's got control of the Senate, no matter who's got control of the local house, whatever, it doesn't matter. You go in there armed and ready with knowledge to fight and debunk bullshit on command. And for me, that alone gives me the strength and conviction to come out here and do these videos and to go speak at events and go speak in front of hostile crowds, like, at the Green Party convention in New Jersey and other places where people are not receptive to hearing macroeconomic reality. They prefer their conspiracies served over ice and maybe a nice plate of pilaf, or braised polenta. I mean, they really truly have these desires for these things, and quite frankly, MMT devours conspiracies. It crushes them, it slaughters them, slices straight through them. Mm-hmm. So that's why you see these people's hair on fire, and we need to put some water on their hair, take them out so they still retain some of their good looks and get them into the game, because they're sidelined with this stuff. Every one of these folks is sidelined, and we actually need them. We need people to move forward so that we can take power and take it to these places and make shit happen. And folks, this is like literally, people say, well, what do I do next? Well, we're going to do some organizing. Real Progressives Activism Pillar will start doing some major organizing in the very near future. For my folks that are in the Activism Pillar hearing, yes, I am putting you squarely on the spot. For our education team to work through it, we will be doing great things there as well. Folks, we are serious about this. We're going to make shit happen, and we need your help. So anyway, Ellis, I'm going to give you the last word here before we close out, sir.
The last word before we close out, sir?
Yes, sir.
That's what you told me to say.
Yes, sir.
You said you were going to say, I said, no. We never got to redefining work. We never got to redefining work.
You know what? Let's redefine work. We got time. Let's do it.
Okay. All right. Well, the job guarantee allows us to redefine work. And this is a major problem when it comes to the automation argument that basic income proponents seem to have. They cannot seem to understand. And Scott Fulwiler, God bless him, he stated quite clearly there. I forget which number it was in his list. All right. But he stated quite clearly that the private sector has never been able to create enough jobs to fully employ everyone who wants a job. All right. Never. It's because the private sector cannot do that. All right. So when you consider jobs and, oh, the robots are coming, you're thinking in your head that business, the private sector, controls job creation. It's in charge of unemployment. It's in charge of employment. And it's not. The government is in charge of unemployment. It determines the unemployment rate, okay, through its net spending. That's deficit spending. And if the deficit is too low, there's going to be a situation of involuntary unemployment, okay? The market just can't do it on its own. Sad, isn't it? But that's the way it is. That's reality. And so when we talk about the job guarantee redefining work, it asks you to drop your religious roots, even though atheists will go, oh, I'm not religious. Yeah, you're going to drop John Calvin and the Protestant work ethic out of there. All right? You're going to have to drop the politics and the ideology. And this ignorant, old, outdated, incorrect definition of what constitutes a real job, okay, and what constitutes valid work. And according to the old school, it's if a capitalist is profiting monetarily and you're earning a wage and the capitalist is profiting from that, then it's a real job. But a stay-at-home mum doing laundry and taking care of kids, raising the kids, taking them to football practice and all that, this is not valid work. This is her duty, her responsibility. It is what we expect of her as society. She shouldn't be paid for the expectations, see, for meeting expectations. You redefine work, all right? How you do that and how the job guarantee does that is it basically says, like Steve said, video games. What if there were, because the economy had been changed because of the job guarantee and businesses had moved around, and let's say this one local community, which used to only be like 12,000 people, suddenly boomed to 40,000 people over 5 years. And all of the big name game developers opened businesses there because demand there was really good. I mean, you know, business is good, it's a nice area, people blah, blah, blah. So let's say they all set up their businesses there to design their games. Well, you know how they are. They love to have people who know their games, who like video games, because that's who they sell to, you know. They're always looking for testers. Okay, well, what if the job guarantee in that local community, what if people stood up and said, you know, what we would like to do is we would like for our local job guarantee office to create jobs for people who are interested in testing video games, but actually creating video games too for public use that would be beneficial for children and blah, blah, blah. You don't know what kind of games it can be. It could be anything. All right. Suddenly playing a video game can be a valid job because you're testing. What am I talking about? I'm talking about right now what video game designers and companies do already. They hire people to play video games to test them for bugs, and they pay them. Oh, but I thought it was an invalid work. Well, only because the capitalist is paying for it. You see, they're earning a profit, so that's okay. Now, what if a job guarantee office could do the same thing? Not necessarily video games, but like a surfer. How many times have I brought this up before? Over in Los Angeles right now, there's an ocean. It's called Pacific Ocean. And there are people surfing in it, and they're unemployed, and they just surf all day. And what if the local community there, the job guarantee office, said, what we need to do is we'd like to collect water pollution samples. Hey, what if we pay the surfers to surf, and they can just collect water samples? Okay. What suddenly was at one time thought of to be not a job, but just leisure, is suddenly a valid job. Why? Because it serves a useful purpose to society. Okay, the local community has determined that it is valuable to them that the surfer goes out, collects water samples while he's surfing, and then drops them off at the collection facility on the way home. Okay, scientists now can monitor pollution levels. Okay, and the surfer gets paid to surf. He's doing a valid job. On top of that, the surfer could also be offered more work too. Hey, instead of collecting the water samples, would you like to teach a water safety class to kids, as Bill Mitchell suggests? That's not valid work. Of course it is. Okay, job guarantee opens up a whole new realm of what constitutes valid work. But importantly, also, this is socially productive work, but it's resource-friendly work. This is social. So we're not dragging down the environment by doing these jobs. Okay, this is sustainable output we're talking about here. Okay, creating nature trails, protecting wild habitats. These are Pavlina Cherneva's examples, right? These are sustainable activities, and they're valid jobs. Musicians and artists can teach kids. They can work in their communities, okay? And they're paid for this work. You say, well, why should they work? Because in exchange for the pay, they're doing something to better their local communities, to benefit it, rather than just receiving a check and hoping these people might take an interest in doing some community work. Here, it's actually going to be done. It's guaranteed, because we are going to pay people to do the work. We're going to pay people to, plant flowers and beautification, and clean up some urban blight and clean up some roads, but we're also going to pay people to do endless jobs that are only limited by our imagination. All right? And this will shift some of our output to sustainability. All right? It's very important, because you can't just keep growing an economy forever when it's eating our natural resources. Eventually you're going to run out, right? So somehow, some production, the final output, when I say final output, what I'm talking about is GDP, it has to shift. Some of that has to shift to sustainable output. It has to be sustainable so that we can grow further and maintain full employment into perpetuity. All right? So we have to redefine work. Stephen, what's a good job that you could think of right now, just off the top of your head, that's valid work that we could do in a job guarantee?
I could go ahead and teach people MMT.
There you have it. Why is that socially beneficial? I don't know. The local community decided it was. It was beneficial for the local community to learn macroeconomic reality. Therefore, there it is. Okay? Yeah, it's real simple. If you can think of a job and propose it, if you can demonstrate that that job has some social usefulness, it is a valid job. It's valid. Okay? It does not have to be work on an assembly line. I said this last week, or was it this week? I can't remember. Steve would know. But I said, what makes you think that work on an assembly line is a valid job, but a surfer being paid to teach a water safety class is not a valid job? What makes you think there's a difference? There isn't. Okay, a capitalist is earning money off the assembly workers' work. Great. But over here, society is benefiting from the surfer's work. Okay, you have a balance there. Over time, the job guarantee and this kind of work and this kind of labor will enhance the private sector. It'll enhance it. It'll increase wages. And it will affect output. It'll change our attitudes, because it allows the government to say we're going to move towards green energy. Well, when it does that, you've got to do some infrastructure work, don't we? Yes, we've got to install new power grids and solar collection facilities, and all that other crap's got to be done, right? Which means more jobs, great paying jobs, but these aren't job guarantee jobs. What I'm saying is the job guarantee leads the way in social production. It helps us to redefine work. And as our attitudes change, as we see the success of the job guarantee, and we see the success that the job guarantee brings to the private sector to bring about change towards sustainability and change our minds about what needs to be done, then the private sector itself will be enhanced. It will change. It'll change with society, because people will demand, well, we want battery-powered cars. It's just all there is to it. We like Teslas. We don't want these gasoline engines anymore. Guess what? You get more and more and more battery-powered cars. Why? Because Congress will be forced. It's going to have to let go of the oil industry, because things are shifting. You know, the oil industry is going to fight. Oh, well, it's going to lose, because you're talking about a finite resource there. Okay, and solar, wind, sustainable energy can be done much, much cheaper, much, much more efficiently. So there's really no argument there. All right. So that's what I'm trying to say. We got to learn to redefine work, and we should do a whole show on redefining work. You know that, Stephen, because people are so confused with it. And I can understand that too, because I mean, if you've been inundated for your whole life with a job, a proper job, Billy Bob, is when you go to work at Shots Brewery and you make sure that the cap's on the bottle, and then you earn that paycheck. You know, but people then look at the government and they say the clerk working at the federal office, that's not a real job.
Hold on, I want to say something really, in my opinion, is like very important. Perhaps it's not important at all, okay? But there was a lot of people going up to the point of the internet, and especially in Y2K era and so forth, that thought the robots were coming already, okay? And then all of us suddenly started making six figures a year that were in the IT industry, because suddenly there was all these jobs, because we had some massive change in technology. Not because technology came and it eliminated our jobs, but because technology came and created a million jobs. Okay?
Yeah, it redirected human labor.
Redefined employment yet again. And I can guarantee, you know what's funny? I think to myself, the guy that sold snake oil back in the day, when they finally realized that there was actual medicine that worked, not snake oil, and he's sitting there kicking stones in the street. Damn it. They're taking my jobs away. Damn it. They're taking my jobs away.
Yeah, it reminds you of the wheelwright. The wheelwright's a good example.
Ridiculous. I mean, what happened? The guy that built caves back in the day. Damn it, they're building those homes and shit, man. No more cave building. God damn it.
Back in the 30s, the same thing was, the machines are ending. All this machines are ending our jobs. There was a big concern. What are we going to do? We got to do this. It never ends human labor. Automation will simply free up human labor to pursue better interests. And let me ask you this question. If you know for a fact that you could get paid excellent money installing solar roof panels, let's say, solar shingle, excellent money with great benefits, all right? A secure full-time job. If you knew that, why the hell would you want to work on an assembly line? Why would you want to do drudgery work? The job guarantee accelerates automation. It says, bring it on. We don't give a shit. We're going to redirect human labor, and part of that human labor is going to address social problems that for 40 years the capitalist has utterly allowed to fall apart because there's no profit in it. We're going to address those things finally. Humans will begin serving humans, and we're going to pay humans to serve humans, right? Okay, so since automation is here, that frees us up to address problems in our local communities and pay people to address those problems. See how that works? Human labor has not ended. It's simply been redirected. And like I said, the robots may be screwing the screws into the battery panel, but you still need fucking humans to design the shit, right? Well, we're talking about unskilled labor, though. What do they do? The job guarantee is redefining the concept of work. It's called social production. What the fuck do you care as long as they're making a decent wage and great benefits?
Well, take a look.
Seriously.
Think about this, Alice. I mean, just watching stupid sci-fi movies, okay? Elysium, they've got this like big space station where the 1% lives and everybody else is down on Earth gagging and stuff like that. Even in that world, there's work to be done, okay?
Star Wars is work.
It's Star Trek
is work. I mean, look. I mean, it's fiction. I realize Star Trek is fiction, Stephen. All right? I realize this. But if you look at Enterprise, that's one hell of an automated facility you got going on there. But why is Captain Kirk there? Can it just be run by robots? And in Star Wars, we see clearly that robots can fly these spacecrafts. So what the fuck do you need stormtroopers for? What the hell are they for? Why do you need the mechanics and the service guys when the little robots go around fixing shit? And why do you need a locksmith when R2-D2 can just stick his little metal dick into the computer and open the fucking door? I mean, what the fuck? What do you think? Because human labor is necessary. Humans will always labor. And you know why? You can't figure out what humans are going to do when the robots come. The reason why is because you don't have ESP. You can't see the fucking future. You can't predict the future economy. But it's not up to you yourself to predict what kind of jobs there will be 100 years from now. For instance, in 1791, did they predict that there would be jobs at Apple building computers and iPhones? Fuck no. Okay, you couldn't imagine something like that. Yet there it is. And there are people being paid to do that. All right. So 100 years from now, what kind of jobs will there be? You don't fucking know. But if the robots are coming to take away human drudgery, I say let the little metal fuckers do the drudge work, and we can go on and better ourselves as human beings, doing something else with our time, right? It's for it.
It's just unfathomable to me, because ultimately, what happens hypothetically? We stop pinching pennies, we stop acting like we're broke, and we start investing in a space program right now that is completely and utterly doing nothing. It's minor league stuff, right?
Exactly. It's beautiful.
Now, all of a sudden, all these tech weenies that were focused on database management for your local whatever are suddenly working hand in hand with NASA to build space stations and outreaches.
Pretty fucking nice.
Now all of a sudden there's a dearth of employment. What are we going to do? Oh my God, we got to start bringing out the baby machine again.
I mean, look, NASA is the public purpose embodied, all right? How much technology was created from NASA? From NASA wanting to go to the moon, NASA doing a space program and landing robots on Mars and all that other crap and going to Pluto. How many jobs and how much technology has followed because of that? All right. If the government would actually if Uncle Sam would actually dig deep into his infinite pocket it's bottomless now, and pull out some dollars and spend them into existence, and I mean fully fucking fund NASA, in 5 years you'd have jobs galore. Jobs galore, and technology would fucking boom. I mean, seriously, boom. It's a no-brainer. But yet you believe that since the government's broke, can't afford NASA, so where the jobs? I don't know. NASA would drive jobs in the technology industry. You wouldn't have to work for NASA per se. It's the technology that would be demanded from NASA to do great things. And I don't mean to quote Captain Kirk, but to go where no man, no woman has gone before. All right, NASA wants to do this. It's going to require technology. We need jobs. We're going to build this. Well, the robots can do this and they can do that. Well, we need designers, and we need this and we need that, and we need other people doing this and we need that. And like Fulwiler said, training people for jobs. That only redistributes workers. That only redistributes workers to the available jobs. It doesn't do dick. Training doesn't do dick. You have to actually give people jobs. And the way you give people jobs is you fund the public purpose. All right? You fund the public purpose. You fund full employment. The government does that with deficit spending. And deficit spending can be targeted at NASA. And right there, are good-paying, high-quality jobs for skilled workers and educated workers right there. All right? And the unskilled workers, we're redefining work. We're going to train them while they're redefining work so they can get better jobs. We're going to provide them free education so they can finally fucking better themselves. Because over the last 40 years, we've been killing public schools, killing the funding. We've been destroying our future by putting a huge price tag in it and a millstone of debt around the neck of every student that wants to go to college, right? We're going to reverse that. We're going to provide free college. We're going to make college free for everyone, right? And we're going to give hope to children and hope to people, and they can learn and they can participate in the future economy. And they can go to school right now while they're going to the job guarantee for free. And they can better themselves. They don't have to be stuck anymore. UBI, what are you going to do? Nothing. You're going to spend. You're going to pay your bills. You're going to spend. Maybe you're going to write that book you always thought about doing. Maybe you're going to go out and start a business. You can do the same fucking thing with a job guarantee. All right? Job guarantee is a basic income.
I was thinking about this the other day too, because let's say hypothetically we have free college for all and so forth. The object to me for kids going to school is to learn, and you send them there and they go and they learn and so forth. And you got to have some means of allowing them to survive as well. So this is another area that I was thinking about, because you're not going to have a student work full time, 40 hours a week or whatever we define full time as or whatever. So the job guarantee is not a standard 40-hour-a-week type deal either, is it? I mean, this is
can be.
Well, it could be, or it could not.
No, right? what I mean is the worker gets to pick his or her own schedule. And I say schedule because no one would understand me if I said schedule. The truth is, a person goes into their job guarantee office, and they don't have to have open availability. They can choose to work complete full-time 40 hours if they want, or they can choose to only work 1 day a week between the hours of 1 and 2 p.m. And that's perfectly acceptable. You get to pick your schedule, and you can change it whenever necessary to meet your needs. So yeah, you could theoretically have a 40-hour week. You could even have less, but the pay is the same, 15 an hour. You know.
All right. Well, so I think we could talk for hours about redefining work, and I want to. And so one of our next shows will have to be on that for sure.
We'll have to come up with something creative to try and get the idea across, because it seems that no matter how many times you explain to people these barriers, these obstacles, these social obstacles, and these cultural obstacles keep coming up, even though people call themselves free thinkers. There they are. And they hate the man and they hate capitalism, but they believe that the only real work is jobs that is provided by the capitalist. You know,
it's really sad. You know, I spent more time.
Very frustrating.
Yeah, I was going to say I spent more time going back and forth, and it's like so much better things to do than go back and forth with somebody who's not even really treating, if you will, in good faith. They're just repeating the same bullshit. But when you try and tell them, guys, listen, we're not talking about twisting ties on the Tootsie Pop or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, we're talking about redefining work. And they come back with automation. I know that I'm not dealing with an intelligent person, or I'm dealing with a cleric of some weird religion. One or the other. But the bottom line is you're sitting there telling them specifically, we are talking about changing what you view as work under the public purpose. What? What about automation? We're redefining work.
Right. Automation
under the public purpose. And then, we are redefining fucking work. Do not take me for a conjurer fool. Blah, blah, blah. You shall not pass.
Yeah, as soon as
nutsoids right there.
As soon as they say automation, you know they're not listening.
No,
you know that's evident. I mean, that's hard, prima facie physical evidence right there. That's irrefutable that they are not listening to you, and that doesn't mean necessarily that they've purposely gone, I'm not listening to Steve Grumby. What it means is that they might be doing that, or they might have such cultural barriers from the upbringing or the friends that they can't even absorb what you're saying. You know what I'm saying?
It's Monty Python, man. They're like, Jesu Domine, dona es requiem.
Jesu Domine.
Exactly.
Robots are coming soon. Yeah, I know. A witch? May we burn her? Yeah, I know. I know how you feel.
All right, man. Well, look, thank you so much.
That makes me want to be one of the guys, though, that, you know, bent over and stuck the trumpet on his asshole and played the trumpet, you know, rather than sit there and bang my head with a piece of wood. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, you know, right away when they say automation, they're not listening for one reason or another. But we should do a show on that.
Oh God! Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
What are you laughing about?
I keep envisioning having a cat going, you know, not to say, yeah. Bring us a shrubbery. Cut down the tallest tree in the forest with a herring.
Exactly. It must be. You know what I like? You know what I like the best was Michael Palin's character, the one that were digging in the mud. And how'd you get? I 14 to workers. by hanging on to outdated imperialist dogma which perpetuate the economic and social differences in our society.
Tossing swords out of ponds is no system of government. Just because some crazy big tossed a sword at you doesn't make that. I didn't make you king. Who made you king? I didn't vote for you.
I thought we were an autonomous collective. You're fooling yourself. We're living in a dictatorship, a self-perpetual autocracy, and it's a working class. Oh, there you go, bringing class into it again. It's what I'm all about, if only people would. And you see, the fucking thing is, the peasants in that fantasy land back then are far, far more intelligent than the intelligent people today. I mean,
we need the Life of Brian, where they talk about, we got to have a council meeting to see if we're going to help Brian.
Right! It's called for immediate discussion.
That's a watery tart. Oh, this is... You know what? Okay, so I
come to see the violence inherent in the system. Help! I'm being repressed. Bloody peasant! Oh, what a giveaway! Did you hear that? Eh?
You're perilously in peril. Oh my God! I was singing. It's funny. My buddy the other day was walking ahead, and I was sitting there doing the "Sir Robin ran away, bravely ran away." Oh, Robin.
No, never. When danger in his ugly head, he bravely turned his tail and fled. No! It's
How would he it could be an African swallow. It could grip it by the husk.
Oh, yeah, an African swallow may be, but not a European swallow. That's
Oh, my God.
And, of course, African swallows are not migratory. Wait a minute. Supposing two swallows carried it together. This uses strand of creeper. What? Held under the dorsal guardian feathers? Well, why not? You see, that's the brilliance of Monty Python. To go off on a tangent like that, that's actually sensible in a scientific way. It's educational, but has absolutely fuck all to do with what is going on. It's beautiful.
Is sacred. Every sperm. All right, I'm done.
That reminded me of Graham Chapman.
I went too far now. Now I've gone too far.
That reminded me of Graham Chapman in that film there. Where he was watching them out there. Look at all those bloody Catholics filling up the bloody world with bloody children they can't afford to bloody feed. That because of the Reformation, I can put whatever I want on my John Thomas.
I look up. It's funny. You can't see this. If I shift this around, let me see if you can see the horrible thing. The shadow is there, but see that right there? That right there is my ceiling fan that's above me.
It's not moving.
And I keep thinking to myself during this time that I need to break off the ceiling fan to be my sword as we take over the building for our means of production. You remember A Meaning of Life? When all the old timers.
Crimson permanent assurance. Yeah.
All right. We gotta call it kaputs. So right. Ellis, thank you, sir, for a great fun show. What a fun ending. And we will catch up next week. In the meantime, folks, thank you all for staying with us and enduring us. Hopefully you learned something amidst all the chuckles. In the meantime, we'll talk to you all soon. Have a great night, everybody.